All right. How's everyone's day going so far? Awesome, great. All right, we're here to talk about civility with two terrific, outstanding public servants, but just as importantly, two really good friends. And we want to make this a little personal. But I'm going to start out with some facts. So when we talk about civility, we're obviously here at this conference, between the political panel you saw with Matthew Dowd, Donna Brazil, and our friend Harold Ford, Michael Porter and Catherine Gale. If you didn't stay for that session, please, please, please do go to the live stream and download it afterwards. It is incredibly meaty. And this session and another session, we're talking about civility in public policy and public discourse. But here are some other civility facts. Harvard Business School poll, 48% of workers have received or been on the receiving end of uncivil behavior and have intentionally decreased their efforts on the job because of uncivil behavior at work. 78% of those workers said that their commitment to their organization declined as a result of the uncivil behavior in the office place. In schools, the Cyberbullying Research Center found that 34% of all students have experienced some form of cyberbullying in the last month. And Psychology Today reported that 45% of people in the country have either blocked or unfollowed someone online because of uncivil comments. So this issue of civility is not just a political issue, it is a societal issue, and we need to do something about it. And we're here with two champions of civility. So between the three of us, we have probably more years in Washington, D.C. than we probably want to think
I'm
about.
young compared to you.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to let you guys work that one out.
He's a few months older than I am.
Yeah.
So you both got to Washington before I did, and I got to Washington in '86, working in the Senate. Fred, you got there and you started working on congressional staff about '77. Debbie, that's about the same time you went to go work for General Motors, and you guys have been in and out of Washington ever since. So '86 was an interesting year, not because it was the year I started there, but it was the year of tax reform, the Tax Reform Act of '86, which was Bob Packwood, Bob Dole, Dan Rostenkowski, Bill Bradley, this historic reform of tax, very bipartisan. Then within 18 months, we had Iran-Contra, we had the Bork hearings. So go back to your first days in Washington and tell us, what was the environment like when you got there? Just go back in time for a minute.
You want to go first?
Before.
Oh, all right. For me, I went in '77. I was a Congressional Hill staffer, and I did constituent service. But where I really got my legislative experience was working for President Reagan. Yeah. And he really set the tone for me with a lot of different people. My immediate boss was Ken Duberstein, who ended up being President Reagan's chief of staff. And for Reagan, for the president, Republican president, Democratic Congress. He got a lot of things done, including the '86 tax reform bill, which Congress passed before I was elected. But he had wonderful relationships, and at the end of the day, he won 49 states when he ran for re-election. So for a Republican, winning New York and California and every place else except for Minnesota, pretty good mandate of getting things done. And so that experience for me then, elected, was in serving in the minority. I never thought we'd be in the majority, and so I said, if you want to get things done, you need to work with the Democrats, and I have kept that attitude whether I've been in the majority or the minority, and as it's bounced back, that's been my MO, and I learned it really from President Reagan. And John Dingell, who was my chairman as I served on the Energy and Commerce Committee, and then I became his chairman a few years later.
So Fred, before we move to Debbie, talk just a little bit about the relationship between Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill. Fierce competitors, but friends.
I have a picture that's hanging in my office now. I'm sitting behind the president, and he's sitting next to Tip O'Neill. And it's in the cabinet room, and they are both laughing, and Bob Dole is there, and a few others, and they had a great personal relationship. He would come, Tip O'Neill would come, and they'd have drinks up on the roof of the White House, and there was
room and balcony.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, they were good buddies, both during 9 to 5 as well as after 5. And Reagan had a great sense of humor. I mean, he loved to tell jokes. And actually, your boss, when you worked there, was Bush 41 as vice president. But I mean, he was pretty good too. He had a very good relationship.
He had a ranking system for jokes.
Yeah, he did. I know. And and he would, he would come up to the Hill and go to the gym. Like once a week, he'd play paddleball up in the house gym. He had also very good relations with both sides of the aisle, and I thought was always one of my favorites.
Debbie, go back to your early days at General Motors. What was it like in Washington?
So, nobody told me you're going to keep putting these pictures of John Dingell up, so I'm trying not to cry up here, gang. When I worked for Bob, some of you know this, some of you don't, that I was a Republican before I married John Dingell. And I worked for Bob Griffin, who was a senator from Michigan, and who taught me a lot. That it was I was an intern in college, but he was very good to me, and it was during the Nixon impeachment. And he taught me some foundations I never thought that I would have, that I have now. So I met this man named John Dingell and ultimately became a Democrat, but I was a Milliken Republican and I was a Dingell Democrat. And people talked to each other. They worked with each other. You respected each other. And John Dingell, from the day I met him, taught me that you work from the center. You find how, I know we're both gonna, you should not have had these pictures up here, Sandy.
We can kill the pictures.
No, that's okay, because because John Dingell taught both of us a lot. And he loved this institution. Relationships mattered. People got to know each other. One of the problems in today, I tell this to any commencement speech I give, I tell the kids to get to know each other. Pick up the phone. I'm so sick of kids texting, and for more than one reason, but they don't get to know each other. Relationships matter. And in those days, people didn't go home. Nowadays, you've got to go home. If you're not home every weekend, I'm the one that, I just swore again, but I'm the one that coordinates the members getting to the plane. I'm yelling at Delta, don't shut the door.
We have our own little table in the Delta room where we sit waiting for our flight when it's delayed. I know they're a sponsor. It's not delayed very often, but when it is delayed.
No, our bigger problem is
they are a big sponsor, Fred.
I know they're on this wall here.
Our bigger time is they really do want to do on-time delay, and one day they shut the door and left Dan Kildee and Lotta and Sherry Bustos on one side, and we're all on the other. So
I think I beat you there. I think I was on the plane, but I was telling you.
But I got on.
Yeah.
But we race out. And you don't get to know each other under those circumstances.
Right.
It's very hard to demonize somebody if you know them. And now there's not time for those relationships. And look, I'm as guilty as anybody. I'm home, I can't wait to get out of that city. But you get in on Mondays, you have votes at 6:30, you're there Tuesdays and Wednesdays, there are literally 10 to 15 things crammed into those evenings, and then we're racing for the
12:45 flight. That's when we want to be on
Thursday. I know that Thursday flight. I know it well.
You've been on it with us.
Yeah. Now, but that's one of the problems. It's not the only problem.
It is a problem.
But in the 80s, when I was there as a really junior staffer, I mean, we would work with Democrats and Republicans during the day, but more importantly, we'd go drinking with each other at night. I mean,
Duddington's. Did you go to Duddington's?
Not that you know.
All right.
No, but I mean, actually, it was Kelly's Irish Times, which was our.
It's on the Senate side, I know.
Yeah, the Senate side. We didn't go to the House side. That's dangerous territory. But the socialization was great. I mean, my first boss, Bob Packwood, he'd do the same thing. He'd be drinking with Chris Dodd or, Senator Kennedy, Dan Moynihan, Patrick Moynihan, right? I mean, he was, they were all friends.
But it's even, you were talking about paddleball. John Dingell played paddleball with George Bush and Don Rumsfeld every day. And those two men stayed friends until, it was sort of eloquent to see they write notes to each other. And George Bush, right before he died, talked about the two of them looking at life in the rearview mirror and the last 24 hours of John's life, Bill Clinton called, but George Bush was one of the last people that John Dingell talked to. They were friends, real friends. Young George.
So who were your first political inspirations? What prompted you both to go into public service and politics?
Well, it was a little bit of a fluke for me because I'd never met a legislator. I never had I visit now a school every week in my district because to make up for all the legislators who never came. And so good things, I've got a lot of former staff that became legislators and they do what I do. But I had never been to Washington before, and I met this young guy after graduating from the University of Michigan, and he was honest and smart and hardworking. His name was David Stockman, and I managed a couple counties for him, and we won. My dad said, "Why are you working for a guy? He's running against an incumbent. He's not going to win. So you graduate from a great school, and it's over." And we won. And I had never been to Washington before, and that's when, I got my job as, in essence, and had a constituent service, and then had a chance later on when he went to the White House to join him. And then people asked me to run, and I said, no, Amy and I are happily married. We got 2 black labs. We talked about pets behind me. 2 black labs, and no, the answer is no. And then they called me back, and I ended up running and ended up winning.
Debbie, what about you?
So I actually got involved in politics because I was 16 years old, had my first job, and got my first paycheck, and wanted to know where it was. And I was like taxation without representation. And it's true. I organized Citizens United for the Vote at 18, and I literally got the 18-year-old vote passed in Michigan. And I met Spence Abraham, John Engler. We were all young. Okay, we were young Republicans together. But Jerry Ford, honestly, and the Ford family remains friends to these days. John Dingell was.
Weren't you a Romney Rockette?
Well, maybe.
Are there pictures of that?
Those have been destroyed. I'm very honored. I was just elected to the Jerry Ford Library. I've been on the Ford School Board at Michigan, but was just elected to the library. And I think Jerry Ford stood for civility, respect, for working with each other. And quite frankly, it's one of the biggest honors I've had to be able to serve on that.
I would agree. Gerald Ford was my political hero too. He's the reason I got involved in politics. So, so clearly the environment today is different than it was when we all started in Washington. What were some of the seminal either events, people, or forces that have kind of driven us to where we are today?
Looking at me. It's hard. I'll tell you, it is as bad as it's ever been today, I would say. And and neither side at this point, in my belief, has quite figured this out. This Congress hasn't figured this out. You got a Democratic House and a Republican Senate, and really very little of substantive legislation is moving forward. Which is really tragic, particularly as we get into a very big political year next year with all these different candidates that are out there. And, maybe it's because when Nancy Pelosi was first speaker, she had an 86 vote margin. And things, she was the ruler of the roost, that's for sure. I mean, a lot of things changed. Then it was Boehner and others, and the margin got smaller. And actually now the margin is even smaller now with Pelosi now, and it is, it's just different. I mean, and you're not finding people. We've got a little stick that we're working on called problem solvers, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of folks that are interested in bipartisan workings, even though we make the difference of getting things done. And we're going to have a busy summer, that's for sure, but it is really bad right now, I'd say.
Well, I actually wrote my thesis on this subject in the 90s. So, and if you talk to historians, we have seen times like this before in our country's history. I think one of the things that's different is social media. We did not have social media, which is contributing significantly. The sad thing about social media is it was those that started it, founded it to connect us, to keep us connected, and it's driving us more further apart. And the vitriolicness, the hatred, what you see on our Facebook page, what everybody's Facebook page. You were talking about those statistics. We are at a precipice. We have to get this figured out because I believe the American people elected us to get things done. I predicted to many people that Donald Trump could be president. Republicans and Democrats alike thought I was crazy 2 years ago. But, and I may still be crazy, but I was right. I believe they elected him because they were tired of partisan bickering and they wanted to see people get things done. And I still think that we've got a responsibility to deliver for the people. And I think people in Michigan want to see us fix the damn road. They want their prescription drug prices are escalating and sky high. They want trade deals that are going to level the playing field. We've got people worried about their pensions. And I think all of us, Republican or Democrats, are going to be judged on whether we deliver on issues that matter to working men and women.
And case in point, our delegation had a big press conference out on the porch this morning, taking on the Asian carp. You'd think that would be a 100% issue. We know the impact of that thing. We got negative comments, like on social media today. It's just amazing how nasty some people are.
The pro-Asian carp lobby, or?
Yeah. They probably have a pack. I don't know. I don't know what the deal is.
Carp pack?
Yeah.
So the presentation by Michael Porter and Catherine Gale earlier today, Catherine made the observation that our political system isn't necessarily broken. It's actually it's actually operating kind of as the political class has intended it to be. She said it much more eloquently than that. So when we think about big issues that should get done or could get done, that have majority support in the American population, but can't get through Congress. My last assignment in Washington working for President Bush was TARP, and the auto bailout. And, thank God for Nancy Pelosi. I say
we call it the auto rescue plan, not the bailout.
Thank you. That's true. There was another Republican who got in trouble for that, for that language. But, the Republicans weren't there. And obviously, TARP went down the first time, and then we had to go back. And it was really Nancy Pelosi working with Hank Paulson, to get the Democratic caucus that really got us through that terrible time. I see the same thing with Obamacare, right? Instead of,
we call that the Affordable Care Act.
The Affordable Care Act. All right, thank you, everyone. I'm out of here. Even Barack Obama said it was okay to call it Obamacare. Yeah. So, okay, the Affordable Care Act, Ms. Dingell, thank you.
Because he watched Fox.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to get to Fox and MSNBC in just a minute here. But, instead of tweaking that, fixing that, making some improvements for that, we had this kind of, in my opinion, silly conversation about repeal and replace, but we didn't have anything to repeal it and replace it with. What are some of the issues that, if they were just open to a vote, in the House and the Senate, that would pass, but it's just the politics that are getting in the way?
So a big one, immigration.
Yeah.
It is such a broken system today, and we all know about it, and it is a crisis on the border. It's got a lot worse. But you talk to any employer, large or small, you talk to your farmers, you talk to the dreamer kids who have been here for 20 years, maybe they're married now and they are living, maybe someone's going to knock on my door and
through no fault of their own.
Call me out, and they came at age 3 or 4 from wherever. This is, if we could have a freestanding vote, we could get this thing done. House and Senate Republicans and Democrats.
Debbie?
Well, I agree on that. I think if we could just have a simple pre-existing condition vote.
Yeah.
That, you know, nobody could be denied insurance because of pre-existing condition. And that gets totally convoluted. And I also believe that the American people want common sense gun legislation. They don't want to take guns away from people, but they want to keep them out of the hands of those that shouldn't.
So you two are doing much more than just talking about civility, bipartisanship, compromise. You two are the leaders in Washington about coming up with solutions. So tell us all about the Problem Solvers Caucus and the Civility and Respect Caucus.
Well, Problem Solvers is a relatively new caucus. Debbie and I were actually elected by, there's about 50 members. It's equal number of Republicans and Democrats. We were elected by our subset to be vice chairs of that. It's led by a Democrat co-chair, Josh Gottheimer from New Jersey, and Tom Reed, Republican from Corning, New York. And we meet weekly for an hour. Sometimes we have a cabinet member come in or a member of the leadership on either side of the aisle. And what we did was really dramatic, in that one of the frustrations that we've had is just what you said. You know, if you had a bill and just allowed free amendments that were germane, could you get these up? We actually were successful, Debbie was, in helping to change the rules of the House that allow more bipartisanship. And so what did we do? And we would have done this had Republicans kept the majority, and the Democrats, by flipping it, did this as well. But members of the Problem Caucus threatened Speaker Pelosi by we're not going to vote for you.
Say, I don't quite tell the story this way.
Yeah. We're not going to vote for you. We were going to do the same thing with us. It was going to be Kevin McCarthy. We're not going to vote for you unless the rules change, because we got to make this place work. We're here because we want to make the place work, and the rules are designed to be against us. So, you know, he said, you know, if you have a bipartisan amendment, guess what? It's now going to come to the House floor. We have to prove it because we have to co-sponsor the bills, but we're going to change the rules. One of the things, and I know John Boehner is going to be here tomorrow, right?
John Kasich.
Oh, John Kasich is here tomorrow. All
Wrong,
right.
Ohio
All
Republican.
right, I know. Kasich's a good guy too, but there was a rule before, you know, we have an argument every year with you know, anyway. There was a rule before that one member could offer a motion to vacate the speakership. And it was simple majority vote, and they threatened John Boehner with that, and as a consequence, he left early. And we changed that rule as well, so not one group anymore can threaten to take down the speaker, and particularly when you have close control. But I'll tell you, changing the rules of the House, and Pelosi realized she would not be elected. There would be a chaos, but she accepted those rules changes. And we now are a more powerful group because by working in a bipartisan way, we can get some things done. And we're going to show that, I hope, when we take up immigration in the next couple of weeks.
Great, that's awesome. Debbie, talk about the work that you and Fred do together. You know, traveling together. I mean, you guys are really an incredible model of friendship and bipartisanship. Talk about that long-standing relationship between the two of you.
Well, we are good friends. He's been my friend for a long time. Now, we probably talk almost every day. And, you know, we just talk about everything. We talk about what's coming up, what's going to happen on the Republican side, what's going to happen on the Democratic side. I'll tell him he's crazy some days. He'll tell me I'm crazy some days. But we also...
But not wrong, just crazy.
Well, we're careful to never... You know what? We never... Well, maybe we do. But we've traveled to each other's districts. When we have issues that we care deeply about, like Fred was the catalyst and really got one of the most major pieces of healthcare legislation through in the last several decades in the 21st Century Cures Bill. I travel with him to help show people bipartisan support. We've traveled the country. We talked to other members.
What do you guys learn traveling together, going to each other's districts, which I think is far too unusual? What do you guys learn by doing that about, you know, other points of view, other districts? I mean, what does that teach you?
You learn a lot about the individual, you know what. But But you know what we did in 21st Century Cures, we went all over, we did go all over the country. And what we did was we listened. We listened to universities, and I'll tell you, both Michigan State and Michigan. And the new president of Michigan State I met this morning, and he actually, when he was at SUNY, a direct result of 21st Century Cures, this was legislation to expedite the approval of drugs and devices. It included $45 billion more in health research. And we've seen great advances since President Obama signed it into law. But by listening to people, and you know, Debbie had a wonderful conference at Michigan Dearborn, where she organized people to come in, veterans and Tammy Carr and others, you know, and we saw firsthand the ravages of diseases and what can we do to try to solve these diseases. And Debbie was a member of the committee. She was instrumental in getting other Democrats to support it, and at the end of the day, it was 392 to 26. Passed it in the House, 92 to 8. And we worked.
It's kind of a rare example of a bipartisan success. It was the 21st Century Cures.
Yeah, and it impacts every person on earth, really is. And great. But we did these in Texas, we did them in Michigan, we did them in Indiana, we did it at Penn State, we went, you know, West Coast, and you got to know members, and people could see who you really were and how you try to drive that process, and both leaderships.
Senator Stafford here, and Great Lakes, you know, every year they zero out the Great Lakes Initiative money, and every year Republicans and Democrats from every Great Lakes state come together and restore that money or increase it. Sioux Locks is another, you know, those are Michigan, but people do come together, and it's important. You know, one of the things that you were asking about traveling, I ended up having a text chain this weekend. There are about 20 women members that, well, we might have been a little upset about Saudi Arabia. But for some reason, one of the members sent their top 5, and then the next, and the 20 of us ended up exchanging. We all do we do mail reports every week. What are we hearing from people on? In Boston, they were hearing more about animals than anything. In Washington State, they were hearing about impeachment. I was hearing about guns. But the diversity of the top 5 from California to New York was fascinating. We're actually going to start sharing that more so people can see that there are different interests. You
know, and that's one of our, you know, kind of operating ethoses around here is that, you know, we have a nation of 330 million people, each with 330 million different strong opinions, and unless we, relearn the art of being able to disagree without being disagreeable, without finding compromise, you know, we're never going to proceed. I mean, you know, so many of our votes on big, important legislation are completely partisan. Right? I mean, the Affordable Care Act was essentially an entirely Democratic bill. This last tax bill was pretty much an entirely Republican bill. You know, that's not a recipe for longstanding, you know, progress.
It's not.
I agree, it's not.
So just a quick comment. We're getting ready to wrap up here. We have presidential candidates, obviously the president who's running for re-election, that will essentially only do interviews on Fox. We've got many of the Democratic presidential candidates, what is it, 124 now?
Or just 25.
Just 25?
Notice Debbie and I both knew that number, right?
Yeah. It's probably easier to talk about who's not running for president on the Democratic side. But,
Debbie
you know,
and I aren't.
Yeah. And well, do you want to make an announcement, Senator? Yeah. Tomorrow, okay. Yeah. But they'll you know, only do MSNBC. If you were talking to presidential candidates on both sides, what would your advice be to, you know, about showing up on media platforms that aren't their core base?
I've already been very clear. I've already told the DNC that I think they're wrong. I'm co-chair of the Democratic Policy Communications Committee and have been encouraging people to do Fox. I have done Fox since 2000. I don't think you write off a whole group of viewers, and I think it's important you talk to everybody and you listen to everybody. So I do all 3.
Fred?
You know, for any of the candidates, they got to really cut through the clutter. You see that in a congressional race, you see that certainly in a presidential race. And I've been to, I went to New Hampshire back in the 90s for President Bush 41 and for others. And man, if you don't know to go in the kitchen door versus the front door, you can, but in today's world with so many candidates, you've got to be everywhere. And social media is a big one too, but you got to do all the networks. You got to figure out a way to do them all. And to ignores a segment that you're not going to win if you don't appeal to someone in that segment to get their heartstring.
Well, on behalf of all of us, I want to thank both of you for your incredible years in public service, all the work that you continue to do, your incredible example of bipartisanship and friendship. And thank you for being friends to me and the chamber. We so appreciate everything, Fred and Debbie. But before we leave, I just have one small gift for Debbie. Okay, clearly they think I'm stronger than I really am. So we just wanted to give you this. It's the Detroiter cover. I'll help you carry it out. Ladies and gentlemen, Debbie Dingell, Fred Upton.